Welcome back to another episode of Dortmund Dispatch. You'll notice there's a bit of a different voice doing the introduction today as Eli's away on vacation. But for any new listeners, my name is Brian Straub, and today I'm joined by one of our usual co-hosts and fellow contributor for BVB Buzz, Joey Meyer. How's it going, man?
Hey, thanks for having me again. I'm actually doing pretty well today, all things considered. Mostly, mostly has to do with the drop in temperature here in North Carolina is no longer sweltering. Knock on wood. So I'm happy about that. But other than the result on the weekend, I'm doing well. How about you?
I'm doing well, aside from, like you mentioned, the result, but we'll get into that. We do have someone on the show who's going to be very happy about the result. We're joined by a familiar face in the form of Ted Lugers of VfB Stuttgart Americana. How's it going, man?
I'm good on two fronts. I get the
Yeah.
cooler temperatures that Joey mentioned here in Cincinnati, and I'm sitting on the other end of a lopsided scoreline. So I'm a happy camper. Thanks for having me, guys. It's good to be back with you.
Yeah, of course. It's always a great pleasure to have you on the show. So I guess let's get right into it since we have you here, Ted. I wanted to first get your thoughts on the match from a Stuttgart point of view, as indeed it was a very big win for you guys. So why don't you start off by running us through kind of your thoughts on the game and what you thought, what you expected coming into it, because it was a massive win.
Yeah, this one, and talk about crazy buildup before a match for two clubs that are not historical rivals by any means. I mean, you had the summer transfer saga, some of which is surprising, some of which was not surprising. For all of us, the writing was on the wall that Seru was going to leave us this summer. It was more a matter of
Right.
where than anything else. Um, Many of us were surprised ultimately that it ended up being Dortmund. A lot of us thought, Italy, England, something like that. So we were saddened that he chose Dortmund, but don't begrudge the guy. I mean, it's a step up in class to a club with a historical higher standard, especially in recent years. So we wish him nothing but the best. Valdemar Anton, completely different story.
Yeah.
All of us as American fans, we're just saddened that we weren't one of 55,000 booing fans every time he touched the ball in the match. And then the Twitter stuff before the match. I mean, the BVB account, like uh, shots fired. I was really
Yeah.
surprised by that. And but that said, I was one of the few people. So we had me, Matt, and Travis on the VfB Americana podcast. I was the only one that confidently predicted a win. Travis and Matt were pretty circumspect about this one and felt like, hey, this is going to be a close match. I mean, this is
Right.
a historically strong team. On paper and on the pitch, Dortmund's got excellent quality. And so I think there were a lot of nervous people that thought this was going to be a really close, evenly matched game that we might come out on the wrong side of the scoreline for.
Yeah, 100%. And I mean, with what you mentioned about Anton in particular, it was to be expected, right? And I think even he said in an interview after the game, it's something he was totally prepared for, but he hopes that this will finally kind of put the final nail in the coffin on it. I don't know if that's going to be the case because I totally understand you guys. When Mario Götze went to Bayern, even when he came back, I wasn't, fully over it. So I totally get it. And I think when you were on the pod, we talked about, these transfers, and, I was very vocal about hoping that they stayed at Stuttgart. Not because they're bad players. Obviously, we've already seen, Serhou Guirassy is a really good striker, or 2 goals in his 3 games, I think it is now. So I mean, he's doing fine for us so far. Anton has had decent performances as well. Obviously, a very experienced player, German international. So you can't go wrong with signing these players. But at the same time, it's like it's taking away from the quality of the league. So obviously, very mixed feelings on my end about it. Obviously, we were hoping they'd do better against you guys, but it is what it is. You guys kind of outclassed us. That's kind of the way I see it. But Joey, why don't you tell us what you thought about the game?
Oh man, this is one of those where it's like, where do I begin? I mean, I think from start to finish, Sebastian Hoeneß outcoached Nuri Sahin. I mean, it kind of went from bad to worse. Shaheen tried to change the formation a couple of different times, but Stuttgart adapted what felt like so seamlessly. And in some ways, it felt a little bit like a grudge match almost.
That's
It's just,
exactly what it felt like.
we took two of Stuttgart's very prominent players, so I understand that there could be some animosity there, and some part of the mental game I think is also on the field of, you're from Stuttgart's perspective, you're visiting Stuttgart, you're coming there with Girassi and Anton. Stuttgart are in front of their home crowd. They had that loss in Champions League, but that was a really good match. I think Stuttgart deserved a point in that one. And clearly they're an informed team. One of my takeaways from this match is essentially that right now, Stuttgart looks like an elite European side, and Borussia Dortmund does not. And the Champions League results, we'll get into that later. But we haven't seen we're used to 4-goal deficit losses against Bayern Munich. That's very normal for Dortmund. But against Stuttgart, I would have liked to at least see an improvement over the 3 losses last season. So, we can get into more specifics in a little bit, but outplayed and outcoached and outclassed.
Well, yeah. So speaking of outplayed and outcoached, we can kind of go into a little bit of the stats here. So just in terms of possession, Stuttgart at 52%, Dortmund at 48. Stuttgart 17 shots to Dortmund 7. Shots on target for Stuttgart 9, Dortmund 3. Big chances for Stuttgart 7, Dortmund 1. Accurate passes for Stuttgart 88, Dortmund 86. So that was close. Expected goals for Stuttgart 3.01 to Dortmund's 0.35. That's crazy. And tackles 1. I mean, Dortmund edged Stuttgart out there, but that didn't do them much, did it, when it came to the chances that they kind of let up? But 100%. I think you hit the nail right on the head, Joey. Stuttgart does look like the team that is in form and is the elite side, because there were a lot of questions, and I remember reading a lot on this about how Stuttgart would handle playing both in Europe and in the Bundesliga. They're doing just fine, and it's really great for the Bundesliga. So it's happy to see. It's not great to be on the end of a 5-1 loss, but it's good to see that they've remained healthy despite the fact that we came in and did take 2 of their best players. Enzo Mio, complete baller. Ted, I'm sure you could vouch for him being a fantastic player. Player that I really liked on Stuttgart side as well as Fabian Rieder. Do you want to talk about those 2 players a little bit and their impact, since the new season has started?
Yeah, sure. I'd love to also kind of piggyback off of the statistical side of things, because I think what's interesting to me is, like, there was obviously a mentality gap and a coaching gap coming into this one, that we saw very early on in the match. And you guys watch a lot more BVB obviously than I do, but the thing I was left wondering about, after the string of the last 4 matches is, like, is Dortmund against most opponents just used to being able to dictate the style of play, and therefore, like, they come in expecting, because with a lot of the minnows, you're going to be able to push them all over the pitch. And with the way that Hoeneß plays, I think he does a great job of using Dortmund's aggression against them, and then also somehow figuring out how to win the possession game. Like, I looked up the statistics before jumping on with you guys. Dortmund had 70% of the ball against Frankfurt, 53% against Werder Bremen, 61 against Heidenheim, 64 against Bruges. And then Stuttgart wins the possession battle, takes the ball away from them, and very much, and this has been, I think, a common theme out of the last 4 matches, Stuttgart decides how the match is going to be played and where the ball is going to be on the pitch. So even with 49% of the possession, Stuttgart, I think, was very deliberate about saying, sure, you can have the ball in the middle 2/3 of the pitch, and you might get a couple of chances on counterattacks in our box, but that is essentially it. And that's kind of been the story of the last few matches, which that's my take on it, and I'm curious to hear what you guys think. I'll give a little bit of feedback, I think, on the the players you mentioned. So was it Mio and Fabian Rieder?
Yes, yes.
Yeah, so I mean, Mio obviously super exciting guy. Like we picked him up, I think 4 years ago from Monaco for 1.75 million euros. And he was that guy that, if you play FIFA or EA FC, whatever we want to call it these days, like he was always an exciting one to try to build up and develop. He was like the one player like in the past several seasons on the Stuttgart roster that you were like, okay, we can make this guy awesome. Everyone else is going to be just ho hum. And it's really cool to see him living up to the potential. He got his chance in the Olympic roster. And you get a sense that even in an incredibly talented French national team in the middle field, that this is a guy who's going to get his shot in the next couple of years to break into that team. So been super exciting. He's been on the cusp the last several seasons, and it seems like he's putting it together. The spotlight is on him right now, and he's rising to the occasion. The third goal was a nice one, and then the assist on the fourth, just sickeningly good. Reader's an exciting one too. He's one he wasn't really on my radar, and I think on the radar of most VfB fans until the Euros this summer when we saw him play for Switzerland. Incredible quality on set pieces. And he'll be an interesting one to see if he kind of breaks into the starting 11 a bit more, but at the very least, in a season where for the first time in 15 years, we're competing in Europe and we need all the depth we can get. He is an amazing piece, a real luxury for us to be able to bring a guy like him off the bench. And I think he was either a free transfer or a very inexpensive transfer for us too. So great bit of business.
Yeah, no, Reader was a player that was on my radar prior to Stuttgart signing him as well. I'm very sorry about that motorcycle that just went by. I hope you guys couldn't hear it. But yeah, no, he is a very exciting player, and I think he is a fantastic bit of business for Stuttgart. I think he'll definitely be very important for you guys. In the same vein as Mio, I wouldn't say very young. I don't think he's super, super young at this point. I think he's still in his early 20s, but still a player that's young enough to learn, young enough to be molded into a really important player for you guys. So I am happy to see him move into the Bundesliga at least and play with a team like you guys, because obviously Honus has the right recipe right now and he's really cooking up something good at Stuttgart. So it is nice to see from that end. From just going on to your point with regards to the tactics, I mean, yes, you're 100% right. Dortmund do like to have a lot of the possession. That does come down to, Nuri Sahin and what he's done at the previous club he was at as well in Turkey. So kind of moving on to that, Joey, I wanted to ask you about, the tactics. And before we go into that, let me just read out the lineup for you, just so you kind of have the basis on who we started out with. Not that you didn't watch the game, obviously, but just putting that out there for our listeners as well. So we had Kobo, Rierson, Anton, Sule, Schlotterbeck, Gross, Mecha, Brandt, Sabiter, Adiemi, and Girassi, obviously. So could you just kind of run us through what you thought of the tactics in the lineup and, what Sahin got right, what he got wrong in all this?
Oh boy. So
The sigh. Oh no.
uh, well, I mean, I don't. I mean, again, this was a thrashing. There's no way around it. But this is only Shaheen's sixth match in charge, so I don't want to be too critical. My initial observations here were Schlotterbeck playing as a left back. Even more surprisingly was Marcel Sabitzer playing on the wing. Especially after all of this came out last week, where he received his Champions League Team of the Season trophy, and he had this conversation in the locker room with Nuri Sahin. He's like, I wasn't playing. I think it was in the 8. I was playing in the 8 when I won this, or was it the 6? Forgive me if I got the two mixed up. And he's just kind of trying to make that point. You hear it from Peter Stoger also. pointing that Sabitzer's not happy playing that role, and we see it in his performances. He doesn't look like he has the greatest morale, and he's not comfortable there. And I would say the same thing, at least about being comfortable about Schlotterbeck. I don't always find him to be as effective as he should be playing in that left back role. I do think that Felix Mecha deserved the opportunity to start. He's shown some real promise in the last couple matches, and I think he played 90 minutes recently and was pretty strong during that. So I was completely fine with him starting, but he seemed to have reverted back to his poor form from the beginning of the season. And then when I ended up going out injured, I wasn't entirely sure if that if the substitute was going to happen anyway, because I did see Jamie Gittins warming up, and it was very clear before that happened that Shahi needed to make some kind of tactical change. I think Gittins did bring some fresh energy, but it was like this one player who knows how to play football in a team of players who are confused. And I think that was sort of the theme as the formation changed like 3 or 4 times, and the different subs went in. It just seemed like everybody was confused. And going back to what Ted was mentioning about that third goal, I just thought that one was, we allowed that goal to happen far too easily. I think I was watching the replay, and other than Gregor Kobel, we had every player between the assist and the shot. And I was just like playing it a couple times and thinking, there's no reason that we should have allowed that shot to happen in the first place. In addition, one thing I've noticed over several matches now is we find ourselves in a position 1 or 2 times during a game where it seems like everybody, including the attackers, are back defending, and it's like 8 players standing in front of the goal while the other team has a couple wild shots. And it was just really a matter of time before we faced a team with the quality that was going to punish us for that. And that's what Stuttgart did, I think. So anyway, I could keep going on, but I fear I'm just sort of talking my head off right now. So
that's what we're here for, Joey. So yeah, no, I mean, listen, but that's what we're here for. We're here to talk our heads off and talk
True.
about the game. The only person happy with the result here is Ted. So let's remind ourselves of that. But no, I 100% agree with you. I think there was a lot of confusion on the pitch. It's been talked about online. Another motorcycle. I'm very sorry about this. There's been a lot talked about, online about, Shaheen's tactics, the setup, where he's played Sabitzer. And that's been a topic of conversation for us as well, on previous episodes as well, where it's like, we know where this player is best. Shaheen is putting him out wide, seemingly because he wants to fit the player in, because he said the player is an extremely important player for him in the idea of how he wants his Dortmund team to play. And to a degree, I can respect that, because, he's saying he wants the player and he's trying to fit him in. But at the end of the day, especially after this game, if we continue to see him out wide, that's going to be a problem, because we've already seen that it doesn't necessarily work. I know he's been able to do it for Austria. He's done very well in that position for the national team. But his place is in the center of the park as a 6, as an 8 as well. And I think that's where, if he's getting the minutes, where he should be lining up. We have players that can play out wide, especially, in terms of depth. I don't think we're lacking at all. I mean, Malin Adeyemi in particular has been doing much better for the most part. I actually personally think he was taken off a little too early in this game, because he was one of the players that was able to make, Stuttgart's defense dance. But he gets taken off and you lose a little bit of that impetus. Jamie Gittins gets put on, and to great effect, obviously assisted Girassi for the only goal that we scored. But at that point, it's kind of a little too late. You also have Julien Duranville, who could possibly be put on. Maybe he thought, still a little too early. But we've barely seen any minutes of him on the pitch, and that's also been a little shocking considering how good of a preseason he had. But it is what it is. I mean, there have been some calls, and I'm sure you guys have seen a little bit of it already in terms of, Shaheen out. And of course, at least in my opinion, I think it's way too early to even think about that. We gave Edin Terzic 2 years, and we weren't fully necessarily happy with the style of play that Dortmund had, with the results, some of the results that Dortmund had. But we let him play out his time and see if we can achieve something. And we came close to achieving a couple things there, right? You had the Champions League final, and we came close to winning the league. So I think in this case, the thought process of automatically jumping to, changing the coach, despite maybe the tactics not being fully understood by us as the fans, I think it's a little harsh and a little soon. I'm not going to sit here and say it's a massive part of the fan base, but regardless, even seeing that in a small inkling or a small amount is kind of frustrating for me, because changing managers left and right isn't going to be the answer for us. Um, something needs to be built, and I mean, Stuttgart is a great example of that in terms of a club that allowed projects to develop and to build, for an actual team to be built and to perform. It took a couple years, but last season was great. This season is starting off all right as well. So I think that's something we should take an example of, and kind of look towards that as kind of the model of stability that we want to strive for at this point. But just wanted to get into a quick quote from Julian Brandt after the game. He said, "We have to go through hell now, and rightfully so, and we'll have to deal with a lot in the next few days. You could have put Pep Guardiola, I'm sorry about that, on the sidelines today. If you play with so little passion, it's only us players who are to blame." So Ted, I actually wanted to ask you, do you think it was a lack of passion that really kind of had overtaken Dortmund in that game against Stuttgart? Or was it simply just, Hoeneß outclassing Shaheen tactically?
No, I think there's definitely some truth in what Julian Brandt said, and I think if he's willing to admit that, then as a guy who was in that locker room, I think he's got a better vantage point than any of us. How much of that comes down to letting in an opener inside of 4 minutes? I think that probably demoralized the team quite a bit. That Stuttgart really had a mentality that we were going to come out swinging and see if we could land a punch early. Um, where where the lack of passion comes in for me for Dortmund is, if you look at Stuttgart's early results this season, we now granted we didn't have a healthy back line until a couple of matches ago, but like we did a
Right.
terrible job of holding on to leads. We allowed Mainz back into a match and ended up tying them 3-3 at home. That says a lot. Freiburg beat us 3-1. So you could score goals against this Stuttgart side, and I think
Right.
if Dortmund came out and scored hit a counterpunch inside of the first 15 minutes, maybe it's a totally different match. But Stuttgart just did not let them off of the mat for the first 25 minutes, and that's, I think, where that lack of passion really bit the team.
Joey?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's certainly an intimidation factor when the team traveled back to Stuttgart. Anytime Anton touched the balls, the whole team heard the entire stadium full of pretty loud jeers, and they were relentless the entire match. It's not like it let up after 15 minutes or
Right.
the beginning of the second half. Um, I think that early goal absolutely demoralized the team, but I think it's also a little bit reflective of some prior problems the team has had in away form, in terms of not being able to maintain the same level of passion on the pitch that they do while they're in their home stadium in front of their home crowd. And the question is, how do they carry that away from home? And I mean, we'll get some away wins this season, but I mean, they need to be more consistent. And I mean, looking at 4 Bundesliga games, 2 home or both wins, fairly comfortable in the end, I suppose, debatably. and then 1 out of 6 points from the away game, or from the 2 away games, and that's not the best trend for going away from home. And a team like Dortmund, um, you just got to hope that this improves. And I do give Julian Brandt a lot of credit for saying that. And I'll get into that a little bit later, but I was impressed with his kind of post-match interview critiques and such.
Yeah, no, I was too. I think it does take a lot for a player to come out and be like, you know what, we messed up, and it's on us, and it's something that we need to improve. And improve, I think they will. I'm not really super nervous about the season going forward with this result. I mean, it's obviously not great, and you need to take it seriously. You need to take a serious look and make sure that doesn't happen again, because we can't be losing 5-0 to Stuttgart as well as they've been playing. If we want to be in the conversation for a title race, Stuttgart is exactly the type of team that we need to be. If not beating, we need to be at least taking points off of away from home. It's not an easy game. Stuttgart are an informed team. No one expected this to be an easy game for Nuri Sahin and the guys. In fact, it was very much, at least in my opinion, the first real test that Dortmund have had, because Brugge in the Champions League, they gave us some issues, and we'll get into that obviously. But and they have some really good players as well, but they're not the caliber of team that we're coming up with week in week out in the Bundesliga, because I do feel obviously the quality is higher in Germany, it being one of the top 5 leagues. So I mean, it's not indicative of a massive problem yet. Shaheen is just coming in. They're still trying to get their bearings in this new system. And I don't think there's as much to be worried about as of yet, but it definitely has to be a warning and a lesson for them. So that's definitely something that I think they need to take from that. But Ted, I know your time is limited, so I just wanted to get into a little bit of the Champions League talk, and wanted to give you the floor to talk a little bit about, Stuttgart, their first Champions League game of the season against Real Madrid, and what you thought of their performance. And then if you could kind of talk a little bit about like the format of the Champions League now and what you think of it, that'd be great. So the floor is yours.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I don't recall the last time that I had been so thrilled and over the moon with a 3-1 loss. But that game had me beaming all of Tuesday evening, even though we ended up losing that one. Just to be back in the competition on arguably the biggest stage in the competition, as you guys know, from having played them last year, getting drawn against them again this year. Like,
Yeah.
this is Real Madrid's competition. The Bernabeu is the top place that you want to play in this competition. And the fact that Stuttgart, after 15 years on the sideline, looking in, fogging up the glass, and oftentimes being really far away on the fringes, the fact that they held with them for 80 minutes, I thought was absolutely incredible. So came away very, very proud of the team. Really, really proud of Dennis Undav for scoring a Champions League goal. Came away losing a lot of respect for Anthony Rudiger. As a former Stuttgart guy, I can't say that I like him
Celebration.
anymore. But aside from that, awesome match for us. Really glad to have us back in the competition. Really glad that the Bundesliga got 5 teams in this year. I think that's super well deserved also. And I think all of them are going to be competitive, which is cool, especially, onto the format piece, noting that 24 of 36 teams are going to advance to the knockouts. We didn't collect great results across the board with Leipzig and Stuttgart losing, but I think Leverkusen looked strong. Dortmund didn't necessarily look strong, but the end result, the putting up a goal differential of 3 and 3 points is a great position to
Yeah.
start. And then obviously Bayern just exploding the
Bayern did
doors off
Bayern things.
Zagreb.
Actually,
Yeah. So, as far as the change the competition goes, my feeling is, from a if I put myself in the seat of a neutral observer, I feel like it's a completely unnecessary, gimmicky change. I don't think there was anything broken or wrong with the traditional group stage format. Now that we're talking about players potentially going on strike because of these additional matches and things, I would have preferred that we just stayed with the old format. But you guys are in the competition every year, so maybe you've got a different take on it. But for me, I'm just happy to have any of the games. 6 group stage games would have been good by me. And if we had crashed out, we crashed out. But yeah, I think bad change, bad for roster construction. I don't like some of the rules in terms of the construction of the rosters. I was pleasantly surprised that we were able to get Andre Chase onto our roster, because it looked like we were going to be, we don't have Nick Voltamata, for example, kind of a backup striker who we wanted to be able to have on the bench for Champions League. We don't, because of some of the new rules. So yeah, I'll get off my soapbox, but not a fan.
Joey?
Well, I mean, before I get into my personal, maybe this is just a personal opinion. No, it's fact. I mean, the real reason for the entire change to this format is that there's like 96 more games, and it's that much more TV revenue, and how UEFA loves their money and FIFA loves their money, and
We know.
anyway, as far as the format itself goes, though, it is interesting. It's a bit unpredictable because you have teams that you don't really expect to play one another, or you have two teams from pot 4 going against each other. So I think that it's going to lead to a table that, at least for the first half of this league phase, I think is going to be highly misleading, and will start to shape up the longer it goes on. I do find it a little interesting. Well, that's more ironic than anything that of course we have to go play Real Madrid away from home. But and one other thing I guess I should mention is it's only 4 additional teams in the tournament, so it's not like there's a whole lot of additional competition. As far as an overall judgment, I think time will tell. It's really hard to say how this will play out. I think this league phase will lead to fewer dead rubbers in the end, where in the group stages of the previous format, you have these instances where the top 2 teams are already qualified, and then you have the teams in 3rd and 4th place who've already are kind of set in their places, and the match doesn't mean anything, and UEFA wanted to get rid of that. So I think that the way that like the teams line up against each other in the knockouts directly has to do with their league position. So like that goal differential on the last day could even play a part. As far as Dortmund goes, we can get into the match in a few minutes, but I do think that the 3-0 is probably it's a generous result to Dortmund, but I'm pretty satisfied with it because at the end of the day, that's a +3 goal differential and 3 points in the table. So, I mean, I'm here for it. So we'll see how this plays out.
Yeah. I think in terms of at least my stance on it, I'm a very big proponent of, if it's not broken, don't fix it. I think they'll find the format that we had previously was just fine. I don't think we necessarily needed this new change, and at the end of the day, I think it's kind of like what you guys are saying. Ted was making the little sign in the back. Yeah, it's about money, man. It is what it is. Dollar bills. That's exactly what it's about. And yeah, it's unfortunate that is the focus of it. But then again, it is a commercialized sport, so I mean, it's to be expected that they would try and push these types of changes. But just very quickly on the note of the changes in the additional games, it's actually something that a lot of coaches and players have been talking about for some time. Obviously, with the calendar being stacked with more games, that means there's more strain on players. It's theoretically good for fans because they get to see the players play more. But we had Nuri Shaheen in one of the interviews of out of last week talking about this. Basically, what he said was, Jurgen Klopp and Pep Guardiola have been both complaining about this, meaning the amount of games for years, and nothing happens. But when players start thinking about strikes, which is what I was going to ask you guys about, that should be a wake up call. It's our job to manage the workload. So, what do you guys think about the idea of players striking, possibly in this situation? Kind of, showing their possible disdain for this. Do you think it's something that we can feasibly see happening in the near future, based on the fact that we're getting all these games and kind of their well-being is also kind of being pushed to the side in favor of making more revenue?
I think it's a very real possibility. The three of us sitting here recording from the United States are already familiar with this from the NFL. As a Bengals
Mm-hmm.
fan, I watched Jamar Chase threaten to sit out the first few games of this season over a contract dispute. We've seen American football players, actually make good on those sorts of threats. I think Chris Jones last year with the Chiefs. So I absolutely think and as a Bengals fan, it was upsetting the possibility of missing out on Jamar Chase, but on the other side of it, I completely get it. I think especially these clubs in England where everybody's got an oil daddy and there's no 50+1 and players are making absolutely insane wages from ludicrously wealthy owners. I am totally fine with players who by our standards are making boatloads and boatloads of money. But by the standards of the wealth that has been amassed around the sport are relatively poor. I'm totally fine with them taking power back into their own hands. I am cautiously optimistic that we won't see it as much in the Bundesliga just because of the kind of egalitarian nature, I guess, of our league versus some of the other big five.
Right. Joey, thoughts?
I mean, it's hard for me to speculate because I'm not one of the players who is going through this right now and having to make that determination of like, can my body physically take this? But I mean, the match congestion has been a problem for years, and I think the Bundesliga has been a little bit sheltered from it since we have
Right.
like the mid-season break, um, and it's especially evident in the Premier League because they've got like all I mean, I don't follow the Premier League or English soccer super closely beyond just the league, but they've got all kinds of different like cups. And I mean, we just have the one German cup, the DFB Pokal. It's the same every year. But I know that the Premier League, they've got all these different cup matches that it just kind of feels like
Crazy.
whoever the next big corporation who wants to sponsor a tournament can throw their name on a trophy too. Um,
Joey, don't forget the DFL Super Cup. It's a real
oh
trophy.
yes,
It's a
this is
real
true.
trophy.
But now some of this sort of match congestion is affecting the Bundesliga. I mean, the UEFA Champions League games, it's just two more games in the league stage. But those are also two more midweek games between Bundesliga matches. And I think the bigger issue probably comes down to FIFA and the Club World Cup, because at the very least, I mean, these guys have a busy calendar through their seasons, no matter what league they're in. Um, Unless you're in the MLS, they at least have the summer off, or summer for training. But the idea that all of these major European teams, especially the biggest name teams, because that's the ones that FIFA thinks are going to make the most money at the tournament. I mean, the idea that they're going to play in this month-long tournament, also go on tour somewhere to raise the brand awareness, have a training camp somewhere, and then also give players an opportunity for rest. It really does feel like it's getting very close to a breaking point. And I mean, if players do strike, I don't think I would do anything but support it, because at the end of the day, I love Borussia Dortmund, but if the powers that are going to harm the well-being of the players that I'm rooting for each week, then you gotta listen to them and let them listen to their instincts, because they're the ones who are playing 90 minutes multiple times a week.
Yeah, 100%. I'm definitely with you guys there, and I think that at the end of the day, this whole dichotomy where you know the profit is being put over the well-being of players makes it make sense that talks of strikes would be occurring and all of that. So I think, yeah, the only thing that we could do at that point would be to support them and say, you know what, as much as we love watching our team play, like you said, Joey, it comes down to a question of well-being, and I think that at the end of the day is important. Some people might say, they make millions every year, why is this an issue? Humans too, right? Like they're physical beings that where their body does end up feeling the strain of all this, and if they pick up injuries because of this, that either shortens their career or just makes their day-to-day quality of life not great. I mean, you hear about players that have played so many matches. I mean, Luis Suarez, I think, is a good example of this. Played so many matches throughout his career, and then now, even when he's playing with Inter Miami, you hear all the time about him constantly being in pain when he's playing. So it's like it's clear that this sport has a strain on players and their physical well-being to further put them under the cosh and put more games onto the calendar, in my opinion, is irresponsible, even if it means more games, more opportunities for us, the fans, to watch them. I think we kind of do have to preserve them as they're the ones, doing what they're doing and providing us with the entertainment that we crave. But being conscious of your time, Ted, I just wanted to say thank you for being on with us. Is there anything that you want to plug before we say goodbye to you?
No, thanks for hosting me, guys. This is a pleasure as always. Yeah, for your listeners, if you're looking for any crossover action, as you look towards the match in February, the return at Westfalenstadion, VfB Americana is your source for all the good news, bad news, and indifferent news about VfB Stuttgart. So come give us a listen. Otherwise, look forward to getting back together with you guys hopefully in the new year, and let's hope it's a top four clash. We're only 4 match days into the season right now, so a lot can happen, and I fully expect as we get to the Rückrunde that we're both going to be towards the top of the table. It should be a really exciting clash, and yes, and only like 7,000 away fans booing Valdemar Anton.
Listen, at the end of the day, the guy, it's warranted. I said in the beginning, I stand by it. I'm happy he's here with us, but you guys booing him, fully warranted. I get it. But yeah, here's
Agreed.
to that. And for both of our teams to have deep runs in the Champions League, because Bundesliga needs to go deep.
Yes.
So,
Yeah.
so
Well, cheers,
we'll go with
guys.
that.
Thanks for having me. It's been a
Yeah,
pleasure.
thank you.
Of
See ya.
course. We'll have you on soon, hopefully.
Look forward to it.
All right, Joey. So Ted is now off the air from us right now, so I guess we could kind of go more into Dortmund versus Brugge. So why don't you tell me what your general thoughts were on the game and how Dortmund performed in this match against their first Champions League opponent of the season?
General thoughts on this one were that it reminded me so much of the Werder Bremen match. Or no, it was the match against Frankfurt, I believe. And forgive me if I'm mixing them up right now. It's getting a little late. Where it's very much a stalemate, and kind of feels like we've got our attacking players in this fluid sort of formation that Shaheen wants them to. But the difference when he's doing it in this situation is he's not playing a traditional number 9 up front. So you've got it's kind of got Adeyemi, Malen, Sabitzer, Brand all kind of drifting into that position, and they were finding opportunities, but it wasn't anything that was coming. It wasn't anything that felt as creative as it could have been, and then we have that second half substitution of Jamie Gittins, who comes on and just dazzles with his footwork and really wins the game for us. I mean, the penalty in stoppage time was fortunate. I'll take it, but I mean, make no mistake, I really think Jamie Gittins won this one for us, and Um, but it wasn't just Gittins coming on. We had Guirassy was also on the field at that point. So, and just like in the match with Frankfurt, I believe it was, Bayer came in. And once we had a number 9 up front, our midfielders started playing better. They were still kind of swapping in and out with one another in the midfield, but without any of them having to focus on like who's going to drift up into that false 9, who's going to take the shot. They just worked together more seamlessly, and it felt like we had glimpses of how this system under Shaheen should be working, especially coming off the Heidenheim match. And yeah, kind of lost it all this weekend. But I mean, I saw a lot of promise in this game. So, how about you?
I mean, obviously, we've kind of already mentioned, it's a good win. It's good to get the 3 points, the goal difference, all that stuff. Seeing Jamie Gittins come on and play the way he did and score another two very important goals for Dortmund. Obviously, very great. But it kind of hinges on what you said. It's once Jamie Gittins came on is when you saw that change and when you really saw Dortmund look like an active threat. And um, to me, that kind of signals that we kind of won the game more so on individual quality, meaning Jamie coming on and being the difference maker. And you want that to happen, obviously, but you want, Dortmund as a team together to pose more of a threat from the jump. So just in terms of the stats for our listeners here, in terms of shots, Brugge had 18, Dortmund had 17. Shots on target, 5 versus Dortmund's 6. Accurate passes, 86% to Dortmund's 93%. XG was 1.3 for Brugge, and we had 1.88. Touches in the opposition box, Brugge had 25, we had 24. Duels won, Brugge had 27, we had 40. Tackles won, 5 to our 10. Interceptions, Brugge had 7, we had 8. So if we just look at the numbers, it was a very close game. And for a lot of the game, up until I would say the 60, 70 minute mark, it was a very close game. And there were a lot of moments where Brugge looked very dangerous. So, I mean, that was a little disheartening to see. And once again, not to bash Brugge in terms of quality. They are obviously a very solid side. But you would expect Dortmund in that sort of game to have a little bit more control, especially considering the Champions League campaign we had last season coming into this campaign. You would expect them to want to build on that and really come out, full guns blazing. But we didn't see that. We saw Dortmund look uncomfortable against Brugge, and a lot of the things that we saw against Brugge, we saw against Stuttgart this past weekend. So it kind of showed just the difference between Brugge, a team that didn't necessarily take all their chances that they had against us because they did have one, or they had more than one, but the one that I'm thinking of in particular is that crazy like rebound off the top of the
Oh
bar
yeah.
that almost went in. So it's like they came very close, and it's like you think about it, it's like, well, what if they score that? Is it a similar result as the Stuttgart game? Because we saw the same sort of defensive inefficiency in that game that we saw against Stuttgart. The only difference was Stuttgart took their chances. So it's indicative. While it's great that we obviously had the win, it's still indicative of the fact that Dortmund do need to work on those defensive deficiencies, get tighter at the back, and make sure that teams like Brugge or Stuttgart don't have as many chances against or for them as they did against Dortmund. So it's definitely something for Shaheen to keep in mind, especially going ahead into the Boca game, which we'll get into a little bit later in the pod. But what were your thoughts on Shaheen's tactics against Brugge and the substitutes in the game?
Um, let's see. I'm gonna have to try to rack my memory for all the subs right now. Um, but I mean, of course, Gittins made a huge impact. I think Emre Can came on and did basic Emre Can kind of things. Oh, he took the penalty. Um, Actually, no, he gave the penalty to Guirassy. That's right. Which
Right,
I
Grassi's first
actually,
goal.
yeah, I actually appreciated that. Just to, I mean, he's the new striker. Give him a little bit of confidence. Give him some momentum. Um, but I don't necessarily think, I can't think of like a major impact that the other substitutes had, aside from Gittins really just kind of turning things around. Um, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like we've kind of already said, it was kind of a game indicative of Shaheen, I guess, kind of, experimenting and kind of working through what he's trying to work through and implement, in terms of his style on the team. Um, and I think, as kind of with the Stuttgart game, at least in this case, it went in our favor. But once again, it's kind of something that we kind of have to, kind of let it take its course and allow Shaheen to kind of go through the motions, and kind of try and see if he can get it right at this point, because Dortmund did decide to appoint him. He is here to stay, and yeah, it's kind of just something that we kind of have to bear with, at least for now. Obviously, down the line, if things continue to slide, then that's a conversation, at least in terms of Shaheen, that we can come back to. Um, but all right, so let's get into our star and dud of the week. So, Joey, let's start with you. Who is your star of the week? I have a feeling I know who it's going to be, but
Yeah, so I'm gonna give my star of the week to Julian Brandt. I mean, I
interesting.
don't,
Okay.
I wouldn't say that he did anything remarkable in either of these matches, but he was the acting captain essentially, with Emre Can not starting either of these games, and I really liked his comments in the post match in Stuttgart, because I felt like he was taking responsibility and he was acting like a captain. And that's something that I think we've maybe not seen quite as much from Emre Can as this season has begun. So it's really nice to me. I mean, I'm also a Julian Brandt fan in general, but it's good to see him kind of step up and really take some of that leadership, because he is the senior most player in the squad right now. So that's why I'm giving him my star of the week.
Okay. Well, we're gonna. I think we're gonna. Yeah. It's gonna be interesting once I get to my dud of the week. But okay. No, I definitely see what you're saying. Don't get me wrong. Listen, I have a lot of respect for Brandt, obviously, as a player, and I'm a big fan of him as well and what he can do when he's at the top of his game. And once again, I'll reiterate, I'm very happy that he was able to take accountability, for um, after the game against Stuttgart, and say, we kind of played like shit. Like that's kind of where we're at. So and that's important, especially in terms of a player that is wearing the armband. Um, you know, we'll see obviously where they go from here, where Brandt goes from here. Obviously, I expect him to have a good season and to perform well. But getting to my start of the week, it's going to be Jamie Gittins for me. 2 goals in the game against Brugge, complete game changer when he came on. And obviously for the game against Stuttgart, comes on and provides the assist for Girassi, his first goal from open play for the club. So I think he's just been awesome as a super sub. And I think, he should be getting more starts. I mean, I said this after the Brugge game too. I was really hoping that he'd be able to start against Stuttgart and really show what he's capable of, because he's pushing for those starting spots, and I think he's shown enough. I mean, the 4 goals he's scored, 4 goals and 1 assist so far. I don't know what else we're looking for in terms of wing play and players out wide. He should definitely be on the pitch, in my opinion. But let's go with your dud of the week now.
My dud of the week I'm giving to our manager, Nuri Shaheen,
That is fair.
specifically um, for the comments that he made midweek about Marcel Sabitzer, the conversation they had, and it was it was basically like he was saying, yeah, I know where Sabitzer plays best. I'm very aware of
I'm not
it.
gonna do it
And
anyway.
then we get to the lineup and we're like, oh, but he's on the wing. And then it's kind of that that old saying of like, definition of insanity is trying the same thing but expecting a different result. And it's just like, you and I know Sabitzer's not at his strongest on the wing. Peter Stoger knows it. Nuri Shaheen knows it. All the fans know it. Like, come on.
But he's still out
Anyway,
on the wing.
that being said, I'm not about the Terzic, or I'm sorry, Terzic, the Shaheen out camp. I certainly think it's far too early to make that kind of judgment based on what we've seen, despite this disaster class performance.
I think that Terzic slip was a little bit of a trauma response, wasn't it?
It could have been.
just a little bit. So my dud of the week, Julian Brandt.
That's
Um,
fair.
and I say this, and obviously, with me saying this, I'm not taking away from the player. As the player, we know, especially after last season, what he's capable of. As you mentioned, the most senior player on the team, and obviously took responsibility after the game against Stuttgart. Things you want to see from your captain. Do I think he, should be vice captain? Maybe not. I think there's players like Nico Schlotterbeck that maybe are better suited for that role. But I digress. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole. But the game against the reason I gave him the dud of the week is particularly because of that performance against Stuttgart, because I was extremely disappointed in what I saw, especially considering, like we said, he was the captain for the game. He is one of the main senior players at Dortmund now, in terms of being there the longest. He knows what's expected of players when they play for Dortmund. And we kind of saw him revert in that game to the player that we saw criticized in his first 2.5 years at Dortmund. Sloppy passes, ineffective in the final third. And yeah, I mean, this should be a player that is leading the club moving forward and kind of bring them into a new era. Marco Reus is no longer here. He's now our main number 10. I expect a lot more from him. I don't doubt that we'll see more from him, but just solely based on this week, there wasn't really another player that, in my mind, that I could really give it to, just because he fell well below the expectations and well below the standards that he's personally set. All the missed passes, all the sloppy play, all the, lackadaisical and kind of just like jogging around the body language. It wasn't indicative of a Dortmund player. It wasn't indicative of a Dortmund captain. So, not trying to pile on him too much, but just because of this performance and this week in particular, I have to give it to him, regrettably. But yeah, I mean that's kind of how I see it. And
That's totally fair.
yeah. So, and we just wanted to give our co-host Pedro also a moment. He couldn't be with us on the pod today, but he did want to share star and dud of the week, so we just wanted to give him a moment to share that in a clip of his own. So we're gonna add that in here.
Hey guys, what's up? This is Pedro from Dortmund Dispatch. And as you can see, this is not my normal setup, and actually it looks nicer than my normal setup. But anyways, just wanted to give a quick review of the Stuttgart 5, Dortmund 1 match that just happened this weekend. As you can see, I'm not participating in the recording live as I usually do. I had some problems with my schedule, but I had a lot of things to say about this match, and I'll try just to condense all those opinions in one small video just to give you guys a little bit of my review of that match and how of a shameful of a performance that was from Dortmund. And also give my star and my dud of this week, just for you guys not to just to have a extra opinion besides the really qualified opinions we already have with the other host. But anyway, first, we're completely just obliterated by Stuttgart. I think that's the best way I can put it, because I was really taking my time to analyze this work by Sahin, because in the beginning of the season, in the preseason podcast, I said 10 games. I think it would be enough for me to give more of an honest and more in-depth opinion about his work as a manager, because we didn't know much of Sahin's work previously, because also he didn't have a lot of experience, but still a lot of potential in there. But we are already 6 games into the season, also counting the Pokal match and the Bundesliga, not Bundesliga, the Champions League match against Brugge, the 3-0 win in Belgium. And yeah, just a lot of ups and downs. And even though in the match against Frankfurt, even though a lot of people said that we did not perform well, and we did not perform in a not a proper, but in a complete manner. How I can put this in English? Now my English is failing me. But we had a few flaws, but I still could see in that match against Frankfurt a lot of positives and things to take from that match as a tactical analysis and all the insights Sahin was trying to input in the players. And even though it wasn't a perfect performance, we still won. So in that sense, it was great. But as the weeks went by, and Bremen, I couldn't see a lot of positive things at all. The performance was just poor overall. And then Heidenheim was a little bit better, and then Bruges, and also forgetting some other game. No, I think that's it. We got a little bit better, but we still gave up too much space for not as good sides as Stuttgart is. And even in the match against Bruges, and with all due respect to the Belgian league and Bruges as well, they had a great match against us. But if you're suffering like that against a side like Bruges compared to other sides that we're gonna face through the season, I mean, that's not a really good perspective for us, right? Because if you're suffering now with this, with against sides that you shouldn't be suffering that much, you should be dominated as Sahin wants to dominate sides like that. I think there might be a problem there, and that was emphasized in our first real test against Stuttgart this weekend. And they completely just overhauled us in all areas in a football match. They pressed better than us. They man marked better than us. They defended better. They created a lot of chances, and honestly, that match could even be even worse for us if it wasn't for Kobo in the first half, especially. So in that sense, just shameful in all areas. And I think I'm just gonna go straight to my star end of the week. Since we're counting the whole week, I would say Jamie Gittens is my star, not only for the goals against Brugge, but he was really the difference maker in that match, which was kind of similar to Frankfurt. We were suffering a little bit against them, and then Jamie Gittens got in and got a lot of one-on-ones in that Sahim system, and then he capitalized it. And he was also our best player against Stuttgart, the only guy who was trying different things and was trying to create chances, and he gave the assist to Girassi to score his goal. So for me, Jamie Gittens is our star, and my dud, unfortunately, is Sahin. He decided to stick with his three center back system, which was not working already in the first half. And by the end of the first half, he already made a change when Jamie Gittens got in, and we changed to a back four system more or less. And we're more solid in that formation, and we mirrored that formation in a 4-4-2, and we were not suffering as much, and we are also creating more chances as we had more space to progress as well. Even that chance with Jamie Gittens by the end of the first half. But then after that, in the interval, he decided to came back to the formation that was not working, just taking Adeyemi out, which I didn't understand at all, and putting Ben Sebaini in. As a left wing back, which already didn't work against Heidenheim and Brugge, especially offensively. So it's not a shame against Bensebaini, but he already didn't work in that position before. Why you're putting in that spot again? And Jan Koto for Ryerson is just a right back for another right back. So, but I really didn't understand why he stuck to a formation that wasn't working at all. And I think the final scoreboard already tells you a lot about why the decision was not the best one, especially, I mean, in my opinion, of course. But yeah, that's pretty much it. My star of the week is Jamie Gittens. Breath of fresh air in the season, but there's a lot of questions going on with Nur Saim, and that's why he's my dud. And I think it's good that we're going to face a side like Bochum, because we might have a chance to get more confidence in playing better against a side that probably is going to compete against relegation this season. So, yeah, that was it. Sorry for I think this video is a little bit long, but hopefully you guys liked it, and I see you guys next week.
So let's talk a little bit about life after Dortmund for some of our former charges, be it coach or player. So in this section, we'll talk a little bit about Edin Terzic, Yusufa Mukoko, and Tom Rota. So let's start with Edin Terzic. I don't know if you've heard this, but I've heard the rumors about him going to Roma and AC Milan. So I wanted to kind of pick your brain on this and see what you think about him possibly fitting in at these clubs and whether he could succeed there.
You see, Edin Terzic has the opportunity to do something very funny right now. And that would be go to Roma and be reunited with one of his absolutely favorite Borussia Dortmund players in Mats Hummels.
Absolutely.
There's just something about that I think would make me laugh if Terzic does end up at Roma. I mean, hey, if he goes to AC Milan, I would be pretty impressed. Was that AC Milan? He was touted as a possible. I
Right.
mean,
Yep.
I think Milan is a fun team to watch. I don't
They
watch them
are.
a lot. I know Christian Pulisic's there right now. Um, but I mean, as far as Edin Terzic goes, I'm a fan of him overall. As a person, I really like him. I think his connection with Dortmund, and some of our listeners might not like to hear this, but I do think that Terzic will be back in some way in the future. You know, whether that's 3 years from now, 8 years from now. I just have a feeling he's going to be one of those guys that keeps returning to Dortmund. Whether he's gonna hop in when we need a caretaker for half a season, and he's free when um, when he's back on first name basis with everybody there. But I'd love to see Terzic take a position or two or three elsewhere and continue growing his career as a manager, especially because of that prospect if he does come back. I would just love to have retained a much more experienced manager, because I mean, look, you know, 2 years plus the caretaker time at Borussia Dortmund, and his 2 seasons in charge. He's one match away from major silverware. So I mean, that doesn't just happen because of nothing. So I think at the right club, he could be a very good fit, especially at a club that maybe has a little bit more patience for a certain type of style of play. Maybe if you're really satisfied with those kind of boring 1-0 wins, then go Terzic. But honestly, though, either location, I'd be happy for the guy.
Yeah, no, I mean you can't really dislike the guy from a personal standpoint. Obviously, very much a Dortmund guy through and through. Um, love the club and all that's extremely appreciated. And I do think it will be very good for him to get experience somewhere else. I do think Roma and Milan are very big asks of Terzic, though I guess Serie A in general, considering it can be more defensive, you do end up seeing more of those 1-0s, those draws, and all of that. Maybe that's a good fit for him. But Milan and Roma are not small jobs, and I think for Terzic, I think it would be better to take a step back. Also, I think for Hummel's sanity, I think give the guy a break. Um, but yeah, I mean, if he does end up there, all the best to him. I do hope he does well, and I hope he can get some experience. And if he does end up back at Dortmund as an interim manager or something at some point, he can get us another cheeky Pokal win, or something like that for old time's sake. So yeah, I mean, we gotta wish him all the best in that sense. But let's move on to Youssoufa Moukoko, who moved on to Nice, as we know. 2 goals and 1 assist in his debut against Saint Etienne. I think that was over the course of 41 minutes. So, what are your thoughts on that? And what complexion, I guess, does this give his move away from Dortmund now that you see him performing in Liga?
I mean, my immediate reaction is the only debut that I can think of that sounds better than that was Erling Haaland's Borussia Dortmund debut.
Yes, yes, yes.
Um, I mean, 2 goals and an assist in 41 minutes. I mean, I think I've written about this. I may have mentioned it before, but for whatever reason that I don't think we're ever going to necessarily be able to pinpoint for sure, things didn't work out for Makoko at Dortmund. I don't know. Didn't really seem to matter who the manager was, the system, but he just was not finding the minutes. And then when he was getting the minutes, he wasn't always performing as we assumed he was capable of. So I'm really happy for him that he can make such an immediate impact at Nice, and I really hope that this kind of jumpstarts his career. And remind me, this one's just a loan, right? Or is it loan with option to buy?
Loan with option to buy, and I think that option is definitely going to get triggered. So, and it's not a high one either. So it's like in
Gotcha.
the
Yeah.
low, or actually no, I think it's around 18 mil. But regardless, I don't think that's anywhere near what he's actually worth. But
Yeah, I mean, especially for a young striker of that age. But this one I am just kind of chalking up to. I hope it didn't work out for him at Dortmund. Not sure why, and let's move on and really hope that this does help his career. And yeah, I mean, I wish him all the best.
Yeah, no, same. I mean, I've, really enjoyed having the player at Dortmund, and I do think that, it's an absolute shame that he's no longer going to be with us, or likely not going to be with Dortmund. I mean, if he continues the way he's going right now, I mean, I think Nice, it'd be no brainer for them to actually trigger that, buy option, and yeah, they'd be getting a hell of a player on a permanent deal. Obviously, we have to see how the rest of the season goes for him, if he can be consistent and all of that. But I have a gut feeling that says, yeah, he's gonna do just fine in Liga and go on to have a decent career. Um, with regards to him not getting minutes, I mean, yeah, that in itself, I think, obviously it wasn't great. Specifically on when it comes to Terzic's time at Dortmund in particular. I mean, we've talked about this ad nauseum, lack of rotation as being an issue, and yeah, he was kind of the victim of that because I think both him and Fulkrug would have benefited from some rotation. Maybe things would have looked a little bit different come the summer. His agent wouldn't have had to come out and do what he did, and we might still have him on the books here at Dortmund. He might be getting some minutes under Nuri Sahin. But that's a lot of speculation, and that's kind of just something we'll never know at this point. But speaking of another player that's left Dortmund, Tom Rota scored a goal and was an important part of Union Berlin's second goal against Hoffenheim on the weekend. I believe he did pick up an injury that forced him off the pitch. I don't know the severity of it at this point, but had a fantastic performance. I don't know if you saw the match, Joey, but I just wanted to kind of get your opinion on that move as well. Now that we see him performing at Union.
Well, I mean, this is one that I questioned at the time, especially because of Borussia Dortmund's current left back situation, and maybe feeling like we don't have a ton of depth there. So why let this really promising, I think he's 19-year-old, who just had a really good loan season at Kiel, bringing them up from the second division. Um, but I wonder, if he had stayed at Dortmund, would Rotha just be riding the bench right now as the backup to Bensebaini? When in a lot of ways, I feel like Rotha might at times be the better player. I think Rotha's got a lot of potential, and if Eli, if you're listening, I know you'll have plenty to say about this next time you're on, because I know Eli's a huge fan of Tom Rotha,
That
but
he is.
he's I don't think Rotha played in Union's first match of the season, or maybe he was used as a late sub. But since then, he seems like he's made an immediate impact. So for a 19-year-old to come in and be able to do that at a club, and Union is one of these clubs that is on the rise. I think. I mean, they certainly have been over the last 5 years. So happy for him that he's doing well. I'm kind of hoping that we do end up triggering that buyback clause in the future if Rotha continues to develop this season. Yeah, kind of wish that we had him as a bench option, if I'm honest, though.
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, obviously showing that he's Bundesliga level, able to play as a starter for Union, and yeah, I mean prior to his loan out to Kiel. I mean, we'd seen him play for Dortmund, and he'd even scored his first senior Bundesliga goal for Dortmund as well. So we knew he was capable of putting in solid performances at this level. Um, why it wasn't a loan, I don't really understand too much, but I mean, it is what it is at this point, and we can kind of hope and wish him the best. I do think there were some comments about him possibly, coming back at some point, because I think there was an interview where he was basically saying like, oh, if Dortmund were to come calling down the line, that's not a bad place to end up down the line, and obviously, academy product, still has connections to the club. We could see him down the line at some point at Dortmund again. And yeah, I mean, we'll see how he develops there. And once again, we can only wish him all the best at this point. Hopefully, he keeps performing as long as it's not against us, because that would kind of suck. But one player I also kind of wanted to mention, not kind of in a life after Dortmund kind of scenario, but a player that is coming back to fitness, and a player that may end up actually having minutes under Nuri Sahin now, especially considering Brandt's performances. Gio Reyna. So with kind of the way that we've seen Nuri Sahin set up Dortmund at this point in time, and we've kind of already seen what some of the players, or how some of the players have performed, I was just curious to your thoughts about, once he comes back and when he's fit, where does he fit in this Dortmund side, and what sort of role do you think he'll play?
I mean, that's a good question. I mean, I'd always hope that Reyna will play. I mean, as a U.S. men's national team fan also, I mean, I could see him slotting in on one of the wings or in like the central midfield, like where Julian Brandt usually plays.
Right.
I do think the style, again, if Sahin can get this system down, I think it will benefit a player like Reyna, who can be fairly versatile on either wing, and can cut in through the center. So, I mean, I think like we've talked about Adeyemi's versatility in, I think, the previous episode.
Right.
And I think that Gio Reyna, while he's not the same player profile, still offers a fair bit of versatility in the attack. So, I mean, I think it's more, in Reyna's case, it's more a case, I think, of the manager being able to get the best out of the player. Because I've been frustrated over the last couple of years of kind of seeing Reyna either warming the bench or kind of producing pretty mediocre performances in black and yellow, and then go to the U.S. men's team and then somehow like come up with these crazy goals and assists when the rest of the team is struggling. So I do find Gio Reyna to be something of an enigma here and there. And a lot of it comes down to his fitness too. Is he able to shake off this injury, and can he stay fit for more than a month or two at a time? And if he is able to stay fit, then I think he could play a role. And I mean, I've been saying that for like the last 3 years of, he could play a role this season.
Right.
But we'll see. What do you think?
I mean, once again, this is not to, kind of put Brandt in the spotlight again, but obviously we haven't seen the best of him this season so far. So, I mean, not to replace Brandt, obviously, but kind of to relieve him of some minutes, maybe possibly put in a more natural player in that 10 position, which is where Reyna himself, as stated on occasions, that's where he wants to play. I mean, half the reason that he went away on loan last season was because Terzic was putting him out wide versus actually playing him in the central position that he wanted to play. And at the end of the day, in my opinion, he is an attacking midfielder. And from what we've heard from Sahin so far, he's been doing well in training. He's been going in the right direction. And I think in those moments where we kind of see stagnation from Brandt, I think it's good to have a player to inject into the team. Player like Reyna, that obviously you mentioned, just shown he has the skills, goes away on international duty and balls out, and then comes back and then doesn't get the minutes. I mean, to a degree, it was kind of a back and forth in terms of last season where he wasn't getting the minutes. There were some conversations about how he was approaching training, how he was approaching the way he performed during the chances that he was given. But at the end of the day, there is a talented player there. And I think in situations where we're seeing that, Brandt or whoever's playing at the 10 is struggling a little bit, injecting in a Gio Reyna that possibly is hungry, that, is performing in training to, do a job, I see no reason why that can't be the case. We've seen him come on previously under Terzic, where he was a super sub and did play a pretty big role in terms of, pushing Dortmund to be in that position where they were so close to winning the title as well with his late winners. The one against Bremen in that season comes to mind in particular. So obviously having a player like that to bring on is useful, and I do think that considering the amount of minutes, like we talked about, the change in the Champions League structure and all that, and obviously with the Club World Cup coming up next summer, there's room for him to play competitive football for this club, as long as he continues to perform in training and do all that. I see no reason why he shouldn't be given a shot. Um, we'll see what happens once he comes back. Obviously, when he's fit. And yeah, I mean, I hope the best for him as well. I do hope that he gets the minutes he needs to develop. Excuse me. And yeah, I mean, like I said, we'll see where the season takes him and Shaheen and the amount of minutes that he gets. All right, Joey. So now that we've talked about a little bit of life after Dortmund, let's return back to Dortmund for a moment and talk about the upcoming match against VfL Bochum. So, how do you feel going into this game?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I would say a little optimistic because it is
Okay.
hard for me to imagine that Dortmund will produce the kind of result that they did on the weekend again. For one thing, we are going to be in our home stadium this time. Um, and after a loss of a 4 goal deficit, Dortmund needs to make a statement. So I think if there was any match that Dortmund would be the team winning by a high deficit, it might be this one because they need to come out and make a statement.
Yeah, 100%. I think, the loss to Stuttgart is every motivation, especially with this being the Little Riviera Derby. They have to go out and get a win here. Anything less is just falling, behind in terms of the Bundesliga title race and just in general top five placement. Bochum has been a tough team for Dortmund. They have been kind of a thorn in our side. I mean, they were one of the teams that kind of made it difficult for us to progress and win silverware in the past. So I mean, it's kind of going to be a statement game for Dortmund, and we're going to have to see a reaction. We heard Julian Brandt. We talked about his quote earlier. Talk about how it was such a bad game against Stuttgart. Well, we talked the talk, but now that and you've admitted to it being the bad game that it was, and this goes for all the players, not just him. You know, have a reaction, show some sort of reaction. I think it's going to be important for Shaheen and all the players to really get together and work out the issues that they saw in Stuttgart, really dissect the game and go into the next one full throttle and make sure they win. Just to kind of give you guys a perspective of what Bochum's season has kind of looked like in terms of the league so far. I mean, obviously nothing spectacular. Initial loss to Leipzig. No losses so far. Their best result was actually this past weekend when they drew against Holstein Kiel. So I mean, and that was a 2-2. So I mean, um, yeah, I mean it shows that they can score, but they better not be scoring against us. That's for sure. Especially after we conceded 5 against Frankfurt. So I'm hoping for a clean sheet. Do you have a score prediction?
Score prediction? I actually think I might end up eating these words, but I think it's going to be something like a 4-1 or 5-1 to Dortmund. I think they're gonna come out guns blazing, ready to just attack. I mean, looking at Bochum, they've got 1 point from their first 4 games. Every indication says that Dortmund should dominate this one. That's rarely the case anyway. But if things in Dortmund are to turn around and get back on track, back in the right direction, then I think we're going to see a big win. If we don't, if this ends up being like a lackluster draw, or even something like a 3-3 draw, I think there's still going to be more questions asked ahead of the next couple of games. So I'm being a bit bold, and I'm going to go with 4-1 to Dortmund. But I may be I may be eating those words next time I'm on here.
Yeah, Joey, I hear you. I'm not gonna go as big with this prediction, but I'm gonna go with a big one as well. I'm gonna go with 3-0. I do think that once again this needs to be a reaction from Dortmund on their side, and it's a derby, so you gotta come out, you gotta show that you're really trying to win the game. And considering how many goals, like we already said, that Stuttgart put past us, I want to see a clean sheet. I want to see that defense tighten up and really show that they're able to keep, or rather give Gregor Kobel more security than they did against Stuttgart in this game. So yeah, 3-0 for me. But just moving on briefly before we conclude, just wanted to give a little bit of a Bundesliga fantasy update. And I believe in our Dortmund Dispatch League, the leader right now is Alfredo Pacinos. So congrats to you. You're currently at 11,143 points. So you've displaced Bayern Warsaw fans at the top. So it's good to see that it's not a Bayern fan leading our league. So yeah, congrats to you, and hoping that we can continue to see Dortmund fans do well in our fantasy league. But I think that'll do it for us, Joey. Is there anything that you wanted to plug before we go?
Yeah, if you are in our Bundesliga fantasy team, you can follow my team on there and the roster. I think I'm in like 20th. I had a pretty rough weekend, but mine is it's Joey's Bag of Donuts. So, Joey on the podcast, Joey in the team name. There you go. But you can find me on Twitter. It is J_Lamson_Meyer. And I'm writing for BVB Buzz and Fear the Wall.
I would put my team in there, but I'm doing woefully, so I'm going to remain anonymous in there. I was putting a lot more stake in Bayer getting more minutes than he has, so that's kind of screwed me a little bit. But I digress. But for our listeners, you can catch me at Brian_Straub94 at Twitter, just like Joey. I write for PVB Buzz and for GGFN when time allows. But more importantly, follow our podcast anywhere you listen to your podcast. At Spotify, Apple Podcasts. We're now on YouTube as well. So check out our videos where you can actually see our faces and when we record these episodes. Hi guys. But once again, thank you very much for listening. We'll be back next week with a new episode. And here's hoping our guys do better in this game against Bochum coming up. So all the best. Take care, guys.